This tunnel in Cornwall is 2,000 years old, and up above me is someone's back garden. We don't know what this place was originally used for, and we don't yet know if it was part of something bigger. But somewhere in the garden out there, let's hope Time Team can come up with some answers. This is a little Cornish garden, higgledy-piggledy garden. It belongs to Joe.
Impressive feature, isn't it,
This is
Tony?
wonderful, isn't it? This is Joe whose garden it is, whose fogou it is.
No, fogou. I know it's spelt F-O-G-O-U, but it's pronounced fogou.
Oh, really?
It's all to do with the pursing of the lips, they tell me.
And is this a map of it?
This is a plan that was drawn up by a local artist and antiquarian, son of a Penzance schoolmaster, a chap called Blight, in 1864, marking the fogou here with its side creek passage.
This is the fogou.
That's right.
And what are all these little bouldery things?
Well, this possibly is the remains of a stone wall, which was part of the Iron Age feature that surrounded this site and was still largely visible in 1864, but may conceivably have been obliterated when the garden was developed and the house built in 1910.
It's presumably this high ground up here.
Right. Yes, it would go off sort of in a curve around here, where you can see the sort of bank here.
And do we know what this is?
No, I always thought that was a stream, but it's the stream is much further down,
Yes,
so I don't know what that is.
Yeah. But do you think that there's actually more to the fogou than we can actually see now?
Yes, there are lots of reasons for that. One is that this little passage here, at the end of it, there's a small doorway. And it's got quite heavy lintels in the shape of a door, and it's plugged with a boulder, so it looks as though this might have carried on further.
In the direction of your lawn over there?
Yes, over there. And then really the most interesting one is that if you dance about on the lawn and thump, it resonates like a drum, sounds hollow. And indeed it does here, where we're standing. And if you... Yes.
It sounds a bit hollow.
Yeah. And it looks as though there might be a passage going off in this direction past the house at least 3 times the length of the fogou.
Right the way to the lawn?
Yeah.
So we have 2 questions to tackle this weekend. Firstly, is there an extension to the fogou under Joe's garden? Well, the geophysics team have just about finished surveying the lawn, so we shouldn't have long to wait for their first results. And secondly, can we find any evidence of the Iron Age settlement which would normally be associated with the fogou? Carenza and Stewart will begin by pacing out the length of the fogou in the hope that they can use Blight's map to find the location of the possible Iron Age wall. The wall itself may have gone, but the bank it would have been built on may still survive.
Right, so this must be the end of it, just hit here, underneath the...
I'm off. Thanks very much. Keep well off that now.
I think there's a hole under there.
That's proof, yeah.
Right, where are we?
I think we're right at the end of this fogou here.
So this is where he reckoned this enclosure was coming around. This is what you've just fallen down, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah. That's right.
Yes, actually you can see there's a line of it carries on through here,
it does,
can't we?
doesn't
And
it?
this is sort of along the bottom of it here.
It's following the contour around, isn't it?
Yes.
Carenza and Stewart are walking along the ridge of high ground, which is all that's left of the evidence that Blight recorded here with these 2 sketchy lines. If Blight's correct, then the enclosure wall would have continued like this, encircling the fogou and the Iron Age houses inside. So if we're looking for evidence of the settlement and how it related to the fogou, then this is effectively our target area. But we do have one restriction this weekend. We can't excavate within this area, as the fogou is a scheduled ancient monument protected by law. But it shouldn't matter, because if Joe's right, then there could be more of the fogou waiting to be discovered under his lawn. So where did you do your jumping up and down?
Well, there's several places, but there's quite a good one here.
Apparently, we're not the only people Joe's invited to stamp on his lawn. Recently, he asked a local dowser to investigate. Now, I thought dowsing was just used for finding water, but in this case, the dowser was able to tell Joe that the fogou does extend under the lawn. Mick, how do you feel about dowsing?
Oh, sceptical, I think, the honest answer to that.
Why?
Well, I'd like to know what it is they actually reckon they're picking up. I mean, I know they told me
We've had a
they've
couple of
got
dowsers
water.
here, and they've said that there's remnants of a passage or whatever.
I think I'd rather look at the geophysics first.
Let's have a look at it then.
I think we've got some results, have we now, John?
Yes, yeah. Right,
So
see if you can see things
just
this time.
orientate us where we are. 'Cause
Yeah, we're actually stood at a point about here.
Is this the
in the
house
middle
over
of the
here,
lawn.
then?
The house is at this
Yeah.
point. This is the resistance data, and this is the whole of the lawned area.
Right.
So we've got a low resistance anomaly curving through, straight section at the top, and it curves around in this direction, suggestive of maybe a ditch or waterlogged chamber that's now collapsed.
But anyway, wet of some sort.
Wet,
Yeah.
certainly, that's the indication.
You see that, Joe?
It's wonderful. Yes, it's quite stunning. I mean, it corresponds with...
So with Joe's permission, our plan of action is to dig a trench at each end of this curve. If what we can see on the geophysics plot actually is an extension to the fogou, then the theory is that it would run back in this direction to join onto the creep passage, which is approximately where you can just see Robin having a crafty smoke. But what was a structure like this for? Well, even though several have been excavated in the past, the original purpose of a fogou still remains a bit of a mystery. We do know that this isn't the original entrance, and these steps are thought to have been added fairly recently, maybe by smugglers, or even by visiting antiquarians.
Well, as you might imagine with archaeological sites, there's a lot of theories, but the way we're coming down into it, you can guess that refuge is one of the obvious ones. You know, actually sort of coming away from where the settlement might have been, you know, and it's hidden away underground. Yeah. The other possibility, of course, with some of them is that they actually go under the ramparts and out through the ditch, so they're a sort of escape route. It's a hell of a thing to build for that. I mean, the other possibility that a number of people have raised is that they're actually for storage. You know, that you've got some sort of underground larder sort of thing. I mean, it might send a lot of food rotten, but I know in Ireland they say, well, you know, what about dairy produce, something like that.
What about a cult? That's
that's
favourite, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the other thing that's been, I think that's been raised more recently, really. And there are a number of things here that suggest that. The roof, certainly, just here, look, has got a stone sticking down, which if you're not aware of it, you can crack your skull on it as you come through. And, you know, that might be only people who are, you know, sort of in the know should know about that. Yeah. The other feature is that this has got a sort of side passage in it called a creep. This one's actually got a radon meter in it. Look, we can go into this.
What's a radon meter?
Well, a lot of granite areas have this gas called radon that comes out. Yeah. And there's been a lot of sort of scares about it recently, and they're obviously monitoring it here. But if we get past that, you see this actually comes up into a side passage where there's a stone across the end now, and obviously it looks as if a lot of this is infilled, and then it's beyond there that you know, the idea is that the passage went on.
How old do we reckon this is?
Well, again, it's difficult to say with a lot of them because of the excavations, but this one, the only ones we know in this area are about sort of 400 BC down to 1st century AD. There was one excavated at Caen Uni with that sort of date. There are one or two attached to courtyard houses round here, which are contemporary of the Roman periods. That's 0 to 400 AD, so sort of late prehistoric, contemporary of the Roman period. 2,000 years old in round figures.
Time of Jesus.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But it's beautiful.
It's a fantastic structure. There's no mortar or cement. It's just the weight of the stones keeping it up. Fogou apparently is Cornish for cave, and only 10 fogous have been discovered in England, and all of these are in Cornwall.
There at the moment.
We're number 3, that's our fogou, and you can see how many there are in the immediate area. The black ones are the ones that are preserved, the hollow circles, if you like, are those that have disappeared. If you open up to a larger picture of Cornwall, even then they're all concentrated to the west of the River Fowl.
And is this Brittany?
That's Brittany, not far away, obviously. These are the souterrains, the underground passages and chambers and creeps of Brittany. And you can see that they're even more numerous in Brittany than they are in Cornwall.
Are there any in other parts of the Celtic fringe?
Well, Ireland is the prime example. They've recorded over 1,000 there. Indeed, I think something like 600 in County Antrim alone. There are positive hazard to ploughing. But it does show that this is a cultural experience that is limited to, as you said, the Celtic fringe.
But the question at the moment is, are we going to find any more of this fogou under the lawn?
Oh my God.
Hang on, what's that?
It looks like the water pipe.
No. Where's Sue?
Would this give you a signal?
Yes.
Would it give you a strong signal?
Yes.
Or put it like this, would it give you the signal that you had on your geophysics?
And would it run in a straight line?
The bit that ran in the straight line, I'm a bit surprised the sort of curve that we got on the trench.
Smile on your face there, John.
Is there a noticeable trench for the pipe?
Well, we haven't cleaned it up yet because we've only just found it. But, are you the same depth as us? Because you obviously haven't got a water pipe, have you? As you just said.
The water main.
Wow.
But if it's going up in that...
There we are. Got it. See it as well, look. And it's bending like the geofish shows, look.
Oh, ah.
Right.
Well, I think that's quite good for locating pipes.
Yeah. Well,
Get a new job,
it explains what that is. Do you know anything about this, Joe? Is it sewage pipe, water pipe? It's not sewage, it's too small, but never come across it.
It's redundant. I think it connects into an old system that no longer works.
What I reckon we've got, when we put the probes in there, the current will flow into the ground and it will just shoot along the pipe. And we'll have a very broad effect. So we'll put the probes in there, we'll see it. When we're over the top, we'll have a much stronger effect, but you'll still have the effect to one side. And so you'll get that broad anomaly that looks like a ditch.
Yeah.
And it's because all the electric currents are just being concentrated along the pipe. So that's why we thought we'd got a trench that wide.
So are we feeling pretty stupid?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, that's what the geophysics for, isn't it? You know, it sort of comes in, gets a signal. I mean, it's the sort of thing you'd expect to get from an iron pipe. I mean, we should have looked at it and said, God, that could be an iron pipe, you know.
Now, I've got the map that Joe promised me from the Dowser findings. Now, it's all fairly higgledy-piggledy, but this is the house again.
Right.
There's the lawn.
Yeah.
There's the fogou. He thinks that there is some kind of tunnel going there.
But I mean, this is not where our water pipe is, which is over here.
That's right.
So did they not pick up the water pipe?
I think he was kind of programmed to be looking for tunnels, not for water. We'll ask him.
When's he coming?
You're absurdly cynical about this
you're
stuff.
right.
But there's loads of things that you don't know what the process is. You don't know the process in your own car, and yet you believe it'll take you down the M4. So why this hostility towards what this bloke's doing?
It's just hostility. I just don't understand what the forces are that they reckon they're picking up. I mean, if somebody could explain that to me, that would be very useful.
When's he coming?
Don't know. I'll have to ring him up.
When he comes, get him to go over the ground again.
Yeah.
And I mean, if the system works like he says it does, then he ought to be able to do exactly the same as John does, and he should be able to locate where he thinks it is.
I think it's only fair. If the geophysics failed to find the extension to the fogou, we must at least give the Dowsers a chance. They think that the extension runs under the lawn like this. But the real priority for the archaeologists at the moment is to get Carenza's trench started here across the line of the bank. Because if we can find the Iron Age wall, then we have a chance of getting our hands on some pottery, which will tell us about the settlement and the people who were living around the fogou 2,000 years ago.
Oh! God. Is this yours?
Mick, come here. Watch this. Can you just show Mick what happens when you hit the...
Well, it's sort of, it just sort of, if I hold them like that, I can't possibly turn them.
Yeah.
Right? If I go forward here, they start going of their own accord. They have a complete life of their own. It's an extension of something inside.
Yeah.
A sixth sense, if you like.
I told you it was scientific.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, that. I mean,
I think Mick's going to need a little bit more convincing. But he is prepared to allow us to take some labour from his scientific trenches to dig our first New Age trench. As far as the other two trenches on the lawn are concerned, Trench 1 is more or less finished. We've reached the natural bedrock, the RAB as it's called. But as county archaeologist Nick Johnson is pointing out, Trench 2 will need to be extended because these stones may be the remains of a wall connected with the Iron Age enclosure. Meanwhile, I'm keen to try my hand at dowsing.
Just keep what you're thinking in your mind. There they go, there they go, there they go.
Scary stuff. With no time to waste, our New Age trench gets underway. And even I'm going to lend a hand on this one. Maybe our luck's changing. Perhaps we will find an extension to the fogou. And who knows, maybe Carenza is just about to find the Iron Age wall that would have surrounded the fogou and the settlement here. But what would that settlement have looked like?
This is Chun Castle. It's a big sort of fortified settlement.
Yeah,
it's one example of what there could have been here. I mean, personally, I just don't think there's enough space for anything like that.
I tend to agree with you, but I mean, like this, I've got a quote that refers to 3 ditches, actually. A chap called Tonkin in 1702 mentions the site here as on top of a hill within a large triple entrenchment surmounting a hole which leads to a vault, which of course has to be the fogou.
I don't know, I'm still not convinced by that.
It's the right date, but it's the wrong structure. It's the wrong type
too
of
elaborate.
site.
It's not the right. It's not a defensible sort of situation either, really.
No.
I mean, personally, I think my money's probably on this. This is a sort of simpler enclosed settlement. Just one bank and ditch around it. They can be quite varying size, these banks and ditches.
A few cattle buyers.
Yeah.
It's a farmstead that's been made defensible, and where you find fogous associated with these sorts of settlements, then you find that the fogou tends to go underneath the rampart and exits into the ditch. If it is an enclosed settlement we're looking at, then this is more likely to be what it's going to be.
Sure.
The last possibility, Joe, is that the other sort of settlement we get is these courtyard houses. These are much later, aren't they, Nick?
These are Romano-British, so they're 1st century AD. But you do find fogous with courtyard houses, although the fogous were associated with earlier settlements and simply have existed right the way through.
An existing site's been adapted in a later manner.
There isn't really space, again, on the site for several of these, which are 25, 30 metres across within an enclosure.
So this is a picture of the type of settlement we're hoping to find evidence of in Carenza's trench. But what about the extension to the fogou? What chance do we have of finding that? Well, the Dowser's trench isn't looking too promising. We're not going to give up with it, but at the moment it's looking remarkably like the other 2 trenches on this lawn. In other words, devoid of any kind of finds at all. In fact, all the graphics team have had to work on this afternoon is this, which is based on a bit of 1950s flower pot found by Carenza, who's prepared to say it might have housed geraniums. Thank you, Carenza. So, end of day 1. And really, it's only Carenza's trench across the bank which is showing any kind of promise. Beneath that power cable, we've discovered stones here that could be fallen rubble from the Iron Age wall. But we have to extend this trench tomorrow to find out. Mick, you're advocating that we should dig some more excavation trenches.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you call them? Exploratory trenches?
Evaluation, that's the word, yeah.
Is this just blind panic?
No, it isn't. I mean, we're talking to Nick about this. I mean, if this enclosure that's shown on the early maps was around, you know, an Iron Age settlement site or whatever, then it's extraordinary that when they built the house, they planed everything off, which is what our 3 trenches seem to indicate, and presumably then brought other soil in, which is clean. You know, where's the soil on the top of the hill gone? Did it go over the edge? It may be that the only archaeology actually survives around the rim, in fact. But I think the strategy, I mean, Tony's querying saying we're panicking. I don't feel
we
at least
always panic at this point in the
well, I don't
and
feel
alcohol
panic.
will cure that later this
well,
evening
yes,
anyway.
I mean, normally we've had some reinforcement by now. But, I mean, it seemed to me that, you know, this is how you set about a thing like this. You put your evaluation trenches in, you know, to try and work it out.
We've still got 2 more days yet, remember.
OK, so this is the end of day 1. Mick's not panicking, Carenza is, but she says she always does at this time. The geophys people have gone to another fogou down the road, so maybe they'll come up with something tomorrow. Please, I hope so. See you after the break. Day 2. And having dug up half of Joe's lawn, we're now moving our investigation onto the area around Carenza's trench, which is in this wooded area highlighted here. A garden like this makes it very difficult to see exactly what we're dealing with, but the news from our survey team this morning is that they're beginning to sort it out.
Well, what we've done here is taken the early depiction on the Ordnance Survey map, 1905, when the enclosure was mapped. You can see that ring there?
This thing here?
That's right. What we think, we've located it in Carenza's trench, and then we've
hang on, just so it's disappeared now. You can't see that.
It was flattened when the house was built.
Yeah.
But little bits of it survive as earthworks, which we were looking at yesterday, and that's where Carenza's put a trench at the top there.
Right.
And what we've done, we've transposed that and Blight's original survey there. We've digitised that into the electronic Ordnance Survey map with our survey that we did yesterday. Yeah. And look at this. You can see here, there's the fogou, and this is the enclosure that was mapped by the Ordnance Survey. Yeah. And that other red line is Blight's survey. What it's showing is that this enclosure is actually quite small. It never went through the garden here at all. In fact, it goes underneath the house and out...
It never went through the garden?
No, it went through the garden.
So we've been digging outside the enclosure?
It's quite possible. I mean, it might be an enclosed courtyard house, something like that.
Which means that we never had a chance of finding the extension of the fogou under the lawn, because the lawn is outside the boundary of the enclosure. And one of the few things we know about fogous is that they're always situated within the boundary of a settlement. So how does Hamish explain what happened yesterday? So why do you think that those rods moved?
Well, there must be some sort of reason. We dowsers don't have the prerogative of being 100% right, unfortunately. And I think there must have been some... part of it, I think, was my concentration probably went, my rational mind took over something. I didn't allow my mind to work properly. I'm not making excuses, mea culpa. I mean, this is something that just hasn't worked for us this time.
Do you feel triumphantly vindicated, Mick?
No, not at all, actually. No, I mean, I was very sceptical and cynical.
I know you are, yes.
As you know, anyway.
Yes, quite right. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're all on a learning curve,
There is
Hamish,
something there, and I'll find out.
That's what it is.
Yeah, we'll find
I'm just going to say water pipe to you once more.
I don't have any problems with the water pipe.
I wouldn't have.
Well, I don't understand what happened. All we found in this trench was natural rock. But I can honestly say that the dowsing rods did move when I walked over here yesterday. But the most important task now is to widen our search around Carenza's trench. So in addition to extending this excavation, we've also started another one closer to the fogou, which is already revealing interesting large stones and could be a sign that this part of the garden wasn't disturbed by the building of the house in 1910. With Joe's permission, we'd also like to dig one more trench to confirm that the boundary of the enclosure follows the line suggested by our survey team, who are now busy adding the fogou accurately to our map. Why would you have a big tunnel that's really... There's been an awful lot of work put into it, hasn't there?
Yeah.
Round a little
Well, it would have been
enclosure.
earlier. Fogous are earlier than the courtyard house.
Yeah.
The courtyard house would have been built on top of it. So they might well not have... They wouldn't have been used.
But they did this at Carnuni, didn't they? I mean, the very elaborate fogou there has a courtyard house on the top of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's much more, as I understand it, like the Irish examples. You know, we basically got a tunnel under a house for storage or whatever.
But it would have been 400 or 500 years later. Could have been, easily.
So from our point of view, essentially, yesterday we were digging in the wrong place.
Well, you were.
You weren't. Yours was the only trench that wasn't in the wrong place.
But you remember the reason we went there?
The current thinking is that the smaller enclosure might contain a courtyard house. Now, if you remember Victor's drawing from yesterday, a courtyard house looks like this and dates to round about the 1st century BC.
Hey, Tony, this is Phil. Over?
Hello, yeah?
I think we've actually broken our duck. I've got a piece of pottery. Over?
Fantastic. What is it, Phil?
We didn't bring any sieves with us, unfortunately.
Come and have a look at this, Tony.
Yeah, we're there, I think.
It's the genuine thing.
The genuine thing.
The genuine what?
Iron Age pottery.
Pot. That's what we want.
How do you know that that is Iron Age?
10 years experience in the area.
No,
No, it's handmade pottery. It's got micaceous fabric to it, which suggests it's actually from the lizard. It's not the local granite.
Tell us what
Micaceous. It's the shiny little mineral.
Glittery. Can you catch
So it's got mica actually put into the clay, in fact, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And
sort of dated.
Yeah, what?
It was difficult to tell exactly
What,
when in the
400
Iron
to
Age.
100?
Yeah.
So anywhere in the Iron Age.
Unless you find a
It's the
rim or
right
something
date
like
for
that.
fogou.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Fugu.
Fogou, sorry.
Day 2 and she's still saying fogou.
It's presumably. I mean, is it burnished on the outside, or because it's very dark, very black, isn't it?
Yes, there is a hint that it has been burnished on the exterior.
Yeah.
See, the other thing which is really interesting is that we've gone down onto a subsoil. You see, the soil is now getting a lot lighter and a lot more compacted. We never got that in any of the other trenches, so it looks as though this area hasn't been truncated the way the lawn has.
This is very similar to stuff.
At last we're getting somewhere, our first bit of pottery, and our first evidence to show Joe.
You get a lot more. See the striations on it?
Yeah.
I think it must be that way up. That's probably where the chap's, marks when he was holding it. And the thing is, you can actually get quite a lot out of a bit like that, because if you look at the curve on that,
Yeah.
that means that you're talking about something probably that sort of size in diameter. You'd fit it onto one of these sort of circular diagrams, and if it's that sort of diameter, then presumably it's that sort of height.
Good heavens.
So you're looking at really something quite large.
And used for what?
Storage, something like that. I mean, it could be almost anything, but because of the diameter, you can at least get something out of it,
Yes.
The pot's the right date, so what we're hoping now is that we'll start to uncover the remains of a settlement which will be contemporary with the fogou. If we can learn more about the settlement, then we might just learn a bit more about the fogou, and we'll certainly begin to build up a picture of the people that lived here. Victor is now able to reconstruct the pot for Joe so that he can get a clearer idea of what it looked like. Victor has also been busy working on something that will give Joe and his daughter Hannah an idea of how they would have looked if they'd lived here during the Iron Age.
It's sort of quite, well, it's sort of Iron Age punk, really.
Apparently it's quite extraordinary that they used lime wash, which then solidified so that the hair literally stood up like that. We've seen some Roman coins, they've got this spiky hair sticking out.
Is it what you expected
I'm not sure
it to
what
be like?
Hannah thinks of that.
Well, it's very clever. I'm not sure it's what I would have chosen myself if I was going to wear anything.
This was high fashion at the time, Hannah.
If Joe's family had lived here 2,000 years ago, they'd probably have farmed the fields around here during the summer and streamed for tin during the winter when the water levels would be higher. Phil is going to spend much of today involved in an experiment to see if we can find some tin ore in the stream in Joe's garden and extract the metal from the rock using the same technique as would have been used by people here in the Iron Age.
Do you want me to hold the pan underneath the rocks here and you can shovel it straight in?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll chuck the big ones out, 'cause we're not going to get any big ones like that.
Right.
Some sort of gritty stuff we're really after.
Oh, eh? So it'll be really, really small pieces then, will it?
Yeah, I would be surprised if we got anything bigger than sand.
Tin was a valuable commodity because it was needed for making bronze, which continued to be in demand long after the Bronze Age.
So in fact, your ore then is just going to sink to the bottom. Is that the idea?
That's right.
Oh, I see.
As you suspend it, the heavy particles sink rapidly.
Right.
And the lighter particles take a bit longer.
And the stones just drop out?
Yeah, I'm sort of doing two actions, really. One is continually stratifying, and the other is sort of gently washing over the light material over the front end.
You're not losing any ore out of it at the same time?
Could be. You never get 100% separation. I'll transfer to that little black pan, which is a bit more subtle. And swoosh it back, make sure we're not going to lose anything.
So this is the moment of truth.
Yeah, you can see all the light-coloured rocks, which are light in weight as well,
right,
going over the front end of the
pan. So the ore is a black rock, is it?
Dark in general. You've got some tin there, Phil.
But is this stuff right here?
Just up in the head there. That's what all the heaviest material is. And there's one or two. They've actually got some reasonably sized pieces in there as well.
What?
That, yeah.
But that is tin ore?
Yes.
Brilliant.
It's smeltable.
Next to the lawn, workers started on our final trench, which is being dug here, in the only workable space along the line of the enclosure. Now, because the garden's so overgrown, the geophysics team have been prevented from surveying anymore here, and instead have been asked by Nick Johnson to find a lost fogou, which is supposed to be sited in this field at Treverneeg, approximately 12 miles away. This is another fogou visited and recorded by Blight in the 1860s, but it hasn't been seen by anyone this century. Obviously, if we can find it, it will be an important discovery, increasing the number of fogous in Cornwall by 10%. Meanwhile, back at our industrial site, Simon Timberlake is called in to help with the next part of the experiment. The tin ore's ground into powder and then rolled into mud balls to keep it together.
Concentrated here.
Right.
So it's really rich ore, and that's the key to the success.
And then how much sawdust?
Just about, that's right.
Enough?
About that, yeah. Remember that tin smelts about 1,000 degrees centigrade, and we want to get the whole furnace really, really hot before we put the charge in.
I'm still not sure about this separation of the tin from the ore.
Well, the ore is tin oxide, yeah?
Right. You take the oxygen out.
Yeah, we're burning the charcoal at the bottom of the furnace. There's very little oxygen.
Right.
And there's it's carbon monoxide there, and so that's reducing the tin oxide.
So take the oxygen out.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're left with a tin.
Just tin, yeah.
This primitive furnace is basically just a hole in the ground lined with clay, and the bellows are made from pig skin and were specially made for this experiment. Like any primitive technology, the key ingredients are time and hard work.
So how long are we going to have to keep this up then?
Oh, for about half an hour now.
Half an hour to smelt it?
Yep, just to make sure. But after about 15 minutes, we'll put another charge in.
Right.
But how are we getting on at our main excavation, Carenza's Trench? Well, in addition to discovering 2 more electricity cables, we're starting to uncover what we think are Iron Age structures inside the rampart wall. The question is, do all of these bits of stone relate to a courtyard house?
You can see we've got this line of...
Yeah, well that was showing up those 2 stones I saw before,
yes. Yeah. And all this, I mean, you can see how loose this is, all these
full of voids, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean this, well obviously the sort of possibilities that have to present themselves is that this is about the same width as the fogou, and that
oh, so
is
we're
a
thinking
question.
of a second fogou, are we now?
Well,
yeah.
Of course, it's a bit too early to tell, but if we have found more of the fogou in this trench, Joe is going to be delighted.
Is there any finds amongst it? That's the...
Yes, we've had some very nice bits of pottery.
Can we stand on your...
The big bit.
I think we found the biggest bit of pottery yet on time too, Mick.
Good Lord.
Here we go, nice bit of burnishware.
With the rim on the top?
Absolutely standard late Iron Age.
Yeah.
Couple of centuries BC.
This is all good dating material, and what we have now are several different varieties of Iron Age pot. This, for instance, is an Iron Age cooking pot.
What we found so far is the evidence of structures, the exact character of which we're not quite sure, so we need to work out whether there is any genuine faces to any of these structures, both on this side and that side.
Yeah.
And so far, all that we have found is evidence of occupation. We haven't found any occupation layers.
Right.
At the moment, we think that the most likely candidate is on that side
inside
over there, and I think we ought to investigate that, and we've got some, with a bit of luck, we've got some really good stuff to look forward to tomorrow.
Elsewhere in the garden, our smelters have reached their moment of truth. Will they have any tin to show for a hard day's work?
So what are we looking for? Will we see it when we see it?
Well, I think where the tin will be, it'll be beneath the base of the furnace, yeah?
Yeah.
So we should have some slaggy, really vitrified bottom to the furnace.
So it'll be literally on the bottom?
Yeah, it'll be probably be underneath, down the crack.
Ah, yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's tin in that, it's metallic.
Yeah.
I mean, we can try to cool it down by putting some water on, but we need to get it a little bit cooler first. Ah, look.
Oh, what?
Can you see the tin?
Really? Yeah.
Now that's mixed up with slaggy bits, really. But what I'm hoping is that we might actually have some that's run through the bottom of the furnace, yeah?
Right.
There. Oh, there. Put that on. Try to get this over here, Phil. Put it on this hammerstone, and I'll smash some of it up. Yeah. Try and get it on a nice flat spot.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh, you got a lovely bit of tin there.
Wow, brilliant.
You got a little tin. Oh, there we are.
Amazing.
Look. Do that with your penknife, Phil. Got a nice bit of tin in there.
Like Christmas, isn't it, eh?
You remember what I said, that it would go through the cracks.
Look at it, and there's some more bits there, look.
Yeah, it'll go through the cracks and it will cool underneath the base of the furnace. That's where it cools when it goes. It's a lovely bit, isn't it? Isn't that nice?
Brilliant.
So end of day 2, and it seems that everything we've attempted today has gone incredibly well. We have our tin, we seem to be unearthing the settlement, we may even have found more of the fogou for Joe. Tonight, with the wine flowing, it seems like there's no question we can't tackle. Well, maybe one.
I mean, have you developed a personal opinion as to what you think it was originally built for?
I think they're
It's really lovely to see them
they're
wriggle.
fridges. Right, because by the time we
Stop trying to influence him.
I think they're for some ritual purpose, of which I don't know. I have no problem with them being used as refuges and stores. At the same time, I don't think that a refuge and a store require that sort of structure in the first place.
We've been talking for long enough. I think everybody on Time Team would like to say a big thank you to our good hosts for an excellent meal. And I'd ask you all to charge your glasses. Here's to tomorrow.
Day 3, and once the important job of recording the archaeology has been done, today's business can get underway, and that is to make more progress with this trench. Can we work out what the structures are? Are these loose stones concealing the extension to the creep passage that Joe is still hoping to find? Well, there's only one way to find out.
More a matter of taking them sequentially more than anything else.
Yeah, it's like that kids game when you have straws in a pile. You have to pick them up without dislodging the one below.
Meanwhile, out at Treverneeg, the geophysics team are on the hunt for the lost fogou. Archaeologists reckon it could be in one of 2 fields, and having drawn a blank in the field next door yesterday, the team are hopeful that they'll find more than just cabbages here.
What do you think of that then, Tony? I bet you think that's a small piece of tin for a day's work, don't you?
Would it have taken the Iron Age people that long to make this little blob?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, there's a lot of work gone into that.
Why are we concentrating so much on tin? As far as I understand it, you've got the Bronze Age and then the Iron Age, and this settlement is part of the Iron Age. So where does tin fit in?
But that just, it's a matter that they've actually started to work iron. It doesn't mean to say they stopped working bronze, or making bronze. That is a constituent part of bronze, so you mix that with copper to make your bronze. So as you went into the Iron Age, they were still making bronze. It just carried on.
So in the same way that in the 20th century we got plastic, but that didn't mean that suddenly metal became redundant.
That's about it.
So do you think that our settlement might be here because there were tin deposits nearby?
I think tin was probably exploited by the people here, but I think well, this particular site is probably more than just a farming site. But you're never very far from tin. You don't have, in West Penwith, you don't have to site your settlement specifically for tin because it's all around you.
We may not be finding bronze in our trenches, but both excavations are turning up fantastic finds. This trench, for example, has produced this lovely piece of hand-decorated Iron Age pot, which Victor has just finished reconstructing. In Carenza's trench, progress is being made slowly removing the loose stones, but the possibility of finding the extension is now beginning to look less likely.
So, could be all that loose stuff was infill for the path here.
Yeah, I mean, we really got to get some other edges to it now. You just don't know about this other side.
So no extension to the fogou for Joe here, but we are now beginning to get a better understanding of the various Iron Age structures in this trench. Here's Carenza's original trench with the bits of stone found on day one. This rubble fell downhill from where the wall actually stood, which is where Carenza is now working. And at the far side of the trench, we think we're now beginning to find the remains of an Iron Age house.
Oh, isn't this fascinating? Well, that's like that big stuff we had yesterday, isn't it? With the grits in it.
That's it. Yeah, that's come out of the rubble.
Storage jars, yeah. Well,
that's the first bit we've had out of there. Yeah. That's quite exciting.
There's some more there.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, look at that then.
Difficult to see when it's dirty like that, isn't it? And the soil's dirty.
But imagine knowing that when you find a piece of dirty-looking piece of stone, that it's something that's 2,000 years old.
Well, Joe's neighbours are clearly impressed, but what's important from our point of view is that all the pottery we're finding is too early to be associated with a courtyard house like this. Which means we're back to our first theory that our settlement looked more like this. And if we're right, we'll have made the rare discovery of an Iron Age settlement that's contemporary with a fogou, hopefully getting us a step nearer to finding out why the people who lived here built fogous in the first place.
What do you think it was used for then?
Underground swimming pool or to hide.
To hide in it, yeah.
We now have the geophysics results from Trevor Neig. Has John finally got something to smile about?
Here we come.
How are we doing then, John?
Pretty good timing.
Yeah.
Oh,
crikey.
It's true.
Do you think Tony will believe it?
Yeah, no, he won't. I think it's a pipe trench.
Yeah, I mean...
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Just what we expected. Enclosure ditch, really clear magnetic anomaly, and then the fogou coming off at a slight angle.
Which marries up exactly with Blight's plan of 1867, boundary ditch and fogou coming off like that. Even the little break, you know, with the narrow doorway that he recorded there.
That's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, this has been lost, how long, Nick, since the...
1867.
67 is the date of Blight's paper.
So it's been lost for 100 years.
No one else found it after that.
Good to see it again.
So a real success with geophysics, and the fogou at Trevor Neig officially back on the map. And it's possible we may have some good news for Joe, too. For although we couldn't excavate the fogou in his garden, it hasn't stopped Stewart taking a closer look at the structure itself. Stewart, what have you come up with?
Oh, something really exciting here. What I've done is mapped out where the side passage is underground.
Yes.
And related it back to the surface using the entrance down there as a kind of key mesh to it. And what I've done is laid out the actual angle. That's the blocked end just down there.
Yeah.
But just set in from it, there looks like there's an odd joint underground. And I didn't really get a chance to examine it very carefully. But when you come up to the surface, there's this boulder sticking through. This is what caught my interest earlier on.
Yes.
Which is exactly where we were on the first day when you said to me, go like that.
Yeah.
It sounds hollow.
Yeah, good.
So you really think, from your surveyor's perspective, that there's the possibility that there is some more tunnel going in that direction?
It's a possibility. That alignment looks quite interesting.
What do you mean by a joint underground?
Well, the stones put together very awkwardly, so the stone's being pushed in.
Pushed it, blocking something.
It's possible.
These stones could, of course, be garden stones, but equally they could be the tips of large stones which go deep into the ground. And it's hard to ignore the fact that they seem to line up with what could be a blocked entrance to the creep. Of course, it's frustrating that we can't dig inside the scheduled area this weekend, but we can't complain. We already have enough to deal with from our excavations in the rest of the garden.
Mick, come and have a look at what we've got here.
This trench, for example, which has so far failed to find the enclosure wall, is now starting to produce last-minute important evidence.
Oh, crikey, yes, it's smooth on one side, isn't it? See that, Joe? It's rather like the one you've got already, isn't it?
Another quernstone, is it?
Well,
Yeah.
the rubbing stone for, yeah. Where's that come from?
This has just come out of the slight ditch that there is here, cut into the natural, roughly on the line of the enclosure.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. It's
That's
really
lovely,
nice. This
isn't it?
trench has turned up some really nice things as well, because it's been a bit
That's gonna be
dispiriting,
nice,
I think, working on it.
What we found here is half a saddle quern, which would have been used for grinding things, mainly flour for making bread. And because it was found with Iron Age pottery, it's actually a very good indication that people were living here and preparing food during the Iron Age.
So we've now got this in a securely dated context. I mean, they're not very easy to date, apart from.
If you've got half of it there, then the other bit ought to be in there somewhere, shouldn't it?
Yeah, unless it was broken in the Iron Age and they said, oh,
Thrown
damn,
away
they
and
chucked the other
discussed.
piece as far as they could.
Oh, a bust one.
You know, I mean, the stuff never is there, is it, next to what you want?
This trench is also beginning to reveal evidence of burning. So this could be a hearth, which is showing up as a charcoal stain against the lighter natural soil. It's hard to believe we didn't find anything on day one, because we now have a total of 60 sherds of pottery, amongst which are 5 or 6 different types of Iron Age pot. And what's amazing is that these storage and cooking pots, along with the flour-making equipment, represent the complete domestic toolkit for an Iron Age house. But what's most important is that all the pottery is contemporary with the fogou, which tells us that the remains in our trenches existed during the time the fogou was in use. It's amazing. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? What can we say about it?
Well, you must remember, Tony, that this is a sort of keyhole in a big site. You know, you've just taken one little slot across it. So that rather like if you dug a trench across your house and it went across the living room into the hall, it would be difficult to reconstruct the rest of the building from it.
Yeah.
But if you went to a lot of the prehistoric sites in this area, there'd be masses and masses of these interconnected walls like that. And that's clearly, Nick, what we're looking at a part of, I would think, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that we can start by saying that we've got the back or the inner side of an enclosure wall.
Can I tread in your trench?
Yeah, go on. You've been dying to do it all day.
I'm so glad that wall survived taking
here.
it down.
This is the inner face, inside face of a rampart.
And
the
the
rampart
outside
that
would be
went-
down
yeah.
there.
And the outer face has tumbled.
So that's,
has
as it were,
tumbled
the
away.
outer wall of the
That's
settlement.
right, of the settlement. And inside the settlement, there are buildings and structures built against the inside wall.
So what do we think this big curve might be?
Well, we think it's part of a wall, and we think that over there is part of another wall, which is going off at a different angle. And this is slightly confused by the fact that a water pipeline comes through
The
here.
pipe's not Iron Age, Tony.
Well, and is this an earlier stage of settlement to this, or is this part of that?
Well, we think probably that may well be a drain, funnily exiting where that water pipe now goes through there.
And over here there's another wall.
Yeah, and that's, we think, part of a hut circle.
And here's the post hole.
And inside a post hole.
But this is only half the post hole.
Only half the post hole, obviously holding a post, perhaps to help hold up the roof. And here are the perhaps remains of 400 years of rebuilding, living and rebuilding behind a rampart associated with the fogou. And the important thing is that the vast majority of finds are entirely Iron Age in date.
And the fogou, of course, occupies an enormous area of this enclosure. It dominates that end of the enclosure, and the probable entrance comes up right in the middle of it. So rather than it being a little tiny feature going out under the wall, which we rather thought to begin with, Stewart's plan now shows it to be, you know, the major dominating thing at that end of the enclosure.
Can we now complement our picture of Joe with a reconstruction of how the settlement looked between 400 to 100 BC? We know that the fogou dominated one end of the enclosure, leaving only limited space for domestic buildings at the other end. The archaeologists have speculated that there might have been an outer enclosure, the evidence for which might be the collection of stones found under Joe's lawn on day one. But what's important about the discovery of the settlement this weekend is that we can now put the fogou into some sort of context. Not only can we visualise for Joe how the wall ran across the bank in his garden with the Iron Age house inside, but we can see the fogou just a mound above the surface, in relation to the size of the enclosure and the other buildings. So what was a fogou for? I personally don't believe it was just a fridge or a hiding place. It's far too well built for that. I think it's more to do with the third option. It's a place connected with people's spiritual beliefs.